I don't think the game's over.
Welcome into Triple Zeros. I'm your host, Josh Buckhalter. We're going to get right into it, man. A lot to break down. A lot has happened since the last time we spoketh. The Texans faced the Colts in the Thursday night football game. The Texans actually rallied to come back and win that game 20-17. Much needed victory, too, because we talked about last episode. The Colts had actually been putting a bit of a hurting on them, just doing the simple things. They don't do much great. They don't do much great, but they do run the ball well. They had another good night running the ball. Jonathan Williams filling in for Marlon Mack actually surpassed 100 yards in his first career start. So that was obviously a positive for him, but they ended up losing the game because, like I said, the Texans ended up rallying back and getting a late touchdown. Deshaun Watson is a bad man. And let me just say that as a Bears fan, as a person who covers the Bears, that is hurtful stuff to see, man. That's not ever what you want to witness when a pick that your team could have made going on to thrive. You know, you always want to look back. That's selfish. I understand. That's the truth. But they won 20-17. Deshaun Watson ended up rallying late to get that touchdown. Like I said, Jacoby Brissett made his return. Obviously got 64% completion, 129 yards, no touchdowns, was sacked, didn't throw a pick either though. Watson threw 2 touchdowns, 2 bombs. He had some bombs to DeAndre Hopkins, who continues to prove why he is the best receiver in the NFL. If you don't know, now you know. And get into, and I also had the nice story about how he gives every touchdown ball to his mom, who lost her sight about 17 years ago. Just a great story all around. But the important part is that the Texans ended up with the victory. Also, Will Fuller came back and had quite a game, 7 catches, 140 yards. He came up grabbing at his hammy at one point, and it was speculated that he might have re-injured himself. But I think he might have just been talking a little trash to, letting everybody I'm still here, the wheel's still good. Good to see that. Like I said, the Texans needed that one bad because a loss there would have put them behind the 8 ball and trying to make the playoffs in the AFC. It's a kind of stacked field right now in that conference. But going on down the rest of them, it's not a great slate. You got the Bucks and the Falcons. Both teams are 3-7. That's 2 disappointing teams right there. So that's not really anything to get too worked up about. The Broncos 3-7 taking on the 7-3 Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. The Bills are a surprise team, one of those teams, you see them every year when they thrive off of the last place schedule or one of the bad schedules and end up making the playoffs because of that. Here in Chicago, we have witnessed that with the Bears last year and seeing what that turns into for the following season. But Josh Allen having a pretty solid year, but what's really been nice is the emergence of Devin Singletary in that backfield. We know Frank Gore has been the guy for this team, for a lot of years actually, but he started off the year, they were splitting more carries, and Gore still got off. He's still their leading rusher. Excuse me, I got a little sidetracked there. He's still their leading rusher, but Singletary is so much more explosive, and it's just nice to see that he's finally being utilized in a role that actually I think Gore was himself suited for when he was first beginning his career in the NFL. But that was just a little an aside. The Bills are going to have a tough time when they get to the playoffs and they play real teams. They've been beating up on bad teams this entire season, so when they face stiffer competition, it hasn't gone too well for them this year so far. Their losses came to the Patriots, who that's not a surprise, but they also lost to the Eagles and they lost to the Browns. Now the Browns one is the most surprising. The Eagles are struggling, but you expect them to still have a better team on the field than the Bills do, better quarterback play at the very least. But the Browns are a surprise, mostly because they're not a good team this year. All the hype that was surrounding them has just been that hype and nothing more. So that loss is one that's concerning. And then when they come back, the Bills, or they sandwich that game, with a victory against the Washington Redskins 20-49 and the 37-20 win against the Miami Dolphins, in which Miami actually made it tough on them. You get the sense, especially with this slate coming up, you get the sense that the Bills are probably not going to be around for the long term when it comes playoff time. That their next few games after this week when they play Denver, they have to go to Dallas, they host Baltimore, they go to Pittsburgh, who despite having the backup quarterback still has a very good defense. Minkah Fitzpatrick's been a beast for them back there. They fell off a little bit last week, but I'm sure they'll be chomping at the bit to get back out when they face the Bills. And then they go to New England to face the Patriots again. They wrap up the season against the Jets, so that'll be a cupcake. But those 4 games right there, that 4-game stretch is going to be tough for them. 3 out of the 4 games are on the road. The one home game is against possibly the best team in the AFC and the Baltimore Ravens. Again, they're probably going to make the playoffs because of the rest of what they've done so far, and they have a couple of easier games. I don't know how this Denver game is going to turn out. That might go a long way to determining if they actually do complete the trip to the postseason. But if they can beat Denver, they got that one at the end of the Jets. That's 2 more games. That'll put them at 9. Does 9-7 get you into the postseason in the AFC? We'll see. Obviously depends on what a lot of the other teams do, but like I said, the Bills have just been feasting on bad teams mostly. The Denver Broncos, that's just a mess. But players are rallying around Vic Fangio, as shouldn't be a surprise to anybody who follows the game, especially if you are here in Chicago and know what Vic Fangio means to his defensive players and how much confidence they have in him to put them in the best position to succeed. The next game, it's the Bears sitting at 4-6, hosting the 2-8 Giants. Now, the Bears season is, for all intents and purposes, over. They won't be making the playoffs. They have a single-digit % chance of making the postseason, but I'm not sure anybody has any confidence that they will make it. And even if they do make it, they're not going to do much once they get there. But if they lose to this 2-8 Giants team that is banged up, Saquon Barkley's a couple of weeks removed from having his shoulder injury, but he just got bottled up for like 13 carries for 1 yard a couple of weeks ago. Daniel Jones likes to throw the ball to the other team or likes to turn the ball over, period. They can't afford to lose this game. And I right now, I'm at a point where I don't think that they're looking to make any coaching changes. I don't think that that's going to be the case. There's going to be some staff shakeups, but as far as Matt Nagy, I don't think that we're even close to that point yet. If they lose to this 2-8 Giants team, there's a good chance that we are reevaluating that stance come next episode. I'm not sure. I don't think it'll be the final blow, but I think it'll go a long way towards seeing Matt Nagy find his way out the door sooner rather than later. Now, of course, they would have a chance to bounce back with the rest of the year, but that would be a really, really tough loss to swallow. The Bears aren't good, but the Giants are worse, and they can't afford to drop this game here. They need some kind of positive momentum. Mitchell Trubisky, who suffered that hip pointer last game, is slated to start. He practiced in full most of the week. Bobby Massey's also expected to play. Like I said, if they lose, the calls from Matt Nagy's head are just going to grow louder and louder. I don't think that they will lose. I think that they'll win. I didn't do a prediction or a write-up on this game in particular. I kind of started addressing the quarterback problems that the Bears have, and really a retool. They don't need a rebuild. That's the point of the piece in Last Word on Pro Football. They don't need to rebuild. They just need to retool. I don't think they're at a point where they're trying to replace Nagy, but they cannot, in my estimation, they cannot afford to come into next year with Mitchell Trubisky as the starter, even if it's nominally. They have to bring in legitimate competition, and I am of the belief that they need to bring in someone else altogether. Now, the argument can rightfully be made that they won't be looking to make any type of moves at quarterback. They're not going to ditch the number 2 overall pick so soon, in his 3rd year like that. That's just not what happens. That's fine, but I also don't think they can afford to let the window of competitiveness that they have right now with this defense, they're going to lose some pieces, that's for sure. But if you're going to lose some pieces, they're going to lose them anyway. If you're going to lose the pieces, you need to take that step on offense from the offensive side that you thought you were taking this year, but you definitely got to take it next year. And in the article, again, Last Word on Pro Football, I actually say that they need to go to Teddy Bridgewater. Now, obviously, his situation in New Orleans will play a big role in how that plays out. If Drew Brees retires, I don't see any way Teddy gets out of New Orleans. Period. I can't imagine a world where that happens. But if Brees decides to come back, I could certainly see Teddy. I would hope Teddy would leave, and if he does, the Bears need to make sure that they are the ones they need to Julius Peppers at his front door at midnight, making sure that they're the first ones that he talks to officially, and get that deal in his hands and make him an offer he can't refuse. It's gonna be tight, but they can then utilize the rest of their draft picks to go and get everything else that they need. Offensive linemen, some street free agents. They're at a point now where they need to, again, they're going to lose some of those pieces on defense. Danny Trevathan's probably gone. Prince Amukamara can be gone. Leonard Floyd needs to be gone. Kyle Long can on the offensive line can go. These are pieces that can be moved, I know they're going to be a dent. But again, I don't think Amukmar hasn't had a great season. Leonard Floyd is going to get paid from someone, but it definitely shouldn't be here. Danny Trevathan is coming off in his contract with his elbow injury. That's not the deterrent. It's just that it's at the end of the contract, and that money can go to, like I said, securing a quarterback like Bridgewater. Now they can jump up around $35 million, something around those lines. They do have to set aside some of that for the rookie salary cap, but they have to ensure that they get Teddy Bridgewater. And even if they want to take one of those second round picks later on, if a quarterback falls to them and they want to draft him there, that's fine too. I would be fine with that. I mean, what's the worst that happens? You end up with a Matt Flynn situation, Russell Wilson situation, or you end up with the Tom Brady and Jimmy Garoppolo, Jacoby Brissett thing where you have your guy entrenched, but these guys behind him are good too, and you could just trade them off for picks later on down the road. I think that's the way you have to go. Regardless, though, it starts with making sure that should Breeze return for another year, that Teddy Bridgewater is the number one option. Now, beyond that, it gets a little murky because everybody else has kind of hang-ups with him. Cam Newton, style of play, his accuracy is not the most accurate quarterback. This is not a running offense. This is a timing, rhythm, passing offense. One that has been obviously passing to set up the run, and I don't think that that'll be a strength of Cam, so I'm not sure that that's a route that he would want to take or that the team would want to take. Nick Foles is under contract. I don't know if Gardner Minshew, and this applies to Kyle Allen and Carolina too, but I'm not sure if Gardner Minshew showed them enough to warrant them being willing to move on from Foles just yet. I could see them letting Minshew sit behind him and growing some more as a quarterback. There were suggestions of Marcus Mariota or Ryan Tannehill. Just flat out no. Both have injury issues. I'm not sure that they elevate your team anymore. And then another option was Andy Dalton, who's been benched in Cincinnati and hasn't been great at any point in his career. Those are the type of people that if they bring in a Dalton, a Mariota, a Tannehill, and even to an extent Cam, but I'll put Cam at another level than those other guys. But a Dalton, a Mariota, and Tannehill for certain. If they bring those guys in, they're not serious about having any type of competition for Trubisky at the quarterback spot. If they bring in less likely options I mentioned in there were the Tom Brady's, the Drew Brees, the Phillip Rivers. Those are veteran guys who I mean, they could possibly make their way to other teams, but I more than likely see them finishing things out where they are. That'll be something to keep an eye on moving forward. But that's my little diatribe on the Bears, and it starts with this, with the quarterback position and what they need to do to address it. Next year's quarterback room needs to look like Teddy Bridgewater. Mitch can still be there, but I listen. I'm not sure where they think he's going to progress to between now and the rest of the year, but when week 17 rolls around, they will have had more than enough game film on him to make a determination on whether or not he is the quarterback of the future. Most of Chicago already has. Most of the NFL world has already determined that he's not. But if they want to hold out and be stubborn, that's fine. They can do that, I think, to the end of the year. But if they go beyond that, they're going to see a fan base that turns on them very quickly, especially if this offense continues to perform sub end of the Trestman era levels. That's bad. Moving on, rest of the games of the slate. Steelers and the Bengals, 5-5 Steelers, who are still alive for the playoffs, strangely. And then the 0-10 Bengals. Bengals are going to get Joe Burrow. That's a hands down, unless they mess it up and go somewhere else with it. But they're more than likely going to get Joe Burrow. They could go in-state and get Chase Young, the defensive end, but they need a passer. We clearly know that. Andy Dalton, I just talked about, he's going to hit the market. They have to get a passer. Ryan Finley is not the guy. Go get Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's like that. I mentioned that. If he won't be around when the Bears pick, but Joe Burrow is like that. I liked what I saw, especially against Alabama from him. The Miami Dolphins take on the Browns. Dolphins are 2-8. The Browns are 4-6. The Dolphins are probably going to have their shot at Justin Herbert. I guess the 2 wins didn't cost them. They have a treasure trove of picks. If they really do want to go up there and get Burrow, they can move up, I guess. But I wouldn't expect it. I would expect them to just stay where they are and just let the chips fall as they may. They need so much that they really can't afford to package up anything to move up for one specific player, despite the fact that Burrow might be worth that. But that's neither here nor there. The Browns, again, as I mentioned, they're a big disappointment this year at 4-6. They're just trying to keep things on track for themselves. The Carolina Panthers at 5-5 take on the Saints at 8-2. The Panthers at one point in time were thought to be a real playoff contender. We see now that they are not, especially without Cam Newton under center. Kyle Allen is still a young player, second year in the league. They've been winning with him, not necessarily because of him. That defense has been carrying him. Of course, we know when your running back is in the conversation for MVP, there's a good chance that a large portion of the credit for your winning should not go to the quarterback. Just saying. Just a random thought. The Saints, like I said, at 8-2, Drew Brees is got back under center and just got back to rolling. I hope he comes back next year because I really do want to see Teddy Bridgewater come to Chicago. He knows the division. It's great. I know I'm bringing this back to another game that we already discussed, but that's not the point. The Raiders at 6-4 take on the 3-7 Jets. The Raiders are making a quiet push to make the playoffs, and if the Chiefs slide, then there's a good chance that the Raiders could win the division and do so. But right now they're looking at a wild card, and that's fine. This is quite the turnaround from John Gruden and Mike Mayock, two guys who were laughed at from Gruden for when he first got hired and how rough things were, and then Mayock from going from TV to the front office executive like that, and everybody just didn't know how it was going to work. They still haven't necessarily gotten the best out of their first pick, Clelin Ferrell, but this year. But people have to be excited. The Vegas residents have to be excited about what's coming their way next year because this team is on the way up. Now, rumor has it they could be targeting Tua Tagovailoa, or really a passer, but they won't have access to the one that they want, a Joe Burrow type of guy. But Derek Carr's been playing really good. I'm not sure why you want to move on. He's been playing really, really well. If he had more attempts, he would be in the MVP candidate, MVP race because his numbers are that good. He's completing the highest percent of the passes in the league, I believe, or there somewhere thereabouts. He's having a marvelous year. And then Josh Jacobs, who is making his case for Rookie of the Year, it's just been that hurts. Josh Jacobs' pick hurts because the Bears needed a running back. The running back that we have hasn't been doing great. Not all his fault, I don't believe, but he hasn't been doing great. And then Josh Jacobs is the pick that the Raiders took with, or the player that the Raiders took with the Bears pick. So that's just, a little salt in the wound. The Eagles at 5-5 will host the 8-2 Seahawks. This will be a blow to the Eagles because I think they will lose this game, but it won't be the death blow. They have a pretty okay slate coming up after this week, but they do have a tough one. And if they pull off the win, then, hey, even better. But they just coming off that loss to the New England Patriots where they just didn't look like they could get anything going. This is just not the right time for them to be facing the Seahawks. But after that, they face the Dolphins, the Giants, and the Redskins. They do have to host Dallas, but then they go to the Giants again to end the year. So after the Seahawks, 4 of their next 5 games are highly winnable games that they need to win and they should win. So if they pull off the win against the Seahawks, that'll just do more. But they're not out of it by any stretch. It definitely will put them behind the 8 ball. And then the Seahawks, look, Russ is a bad man. And I couldn't argue with anybody that would want to give him the MVP award this year. He's having that good of a season, but he always does. And we know how much he means to that team. They're coming off their bye, but before that, they were on a 3-game win streak. They had actually won 6 out of their last 7, 8 out of their last 9. They're just on having an incredible year. Obviously, 8 out of their last 10. I'm sorry. This one should be a game where they go out and do their thing. They might struggle to run a little bit. Eagles can still get after you in the run game, but that secondary is looking like food right now to a wide receiver group that just is officially going to have Tyler Lockett back in the fold. Yes, for my fantasy team. Little side note. Nobody cares about your fantasy team. So I expect the Seahawks to fully win this game and move on to 9-2, and Russ to strengthen his candidacy for the MVP award. The Lions at 3-6-1 and the Redskins at 1-9, moving right along. The Jaguars at 4-6 taking on the Tennessee Titans at 5-5. The Titans, Ryan Tannehill. You know what? Regardless of that, because both of them are mediocre quarterbacks, Ryan Tannehill and Marcus Mariota. So I'm not really too concerned about that. But it is interesting to me that they are improving, but not really. Ever since Jeff Fisher's been gone, they haven't hit double-digit wins, and they're going to struggle to do so again. They are cursed by Mr. 8-8, Mr. 9-7, 7-9, and I think that's hilarious. Just because they're a really tough team, but they're just one of those teams that average is just mediocre when it all is said and done, and I think that's what you end up seeing a lot of times from them. The Dallas Cowboys 6-4 take on the Patriots at 9-1. Now these last 3 games are all humongous, have huge implications. No one expects the Cowboys to win, but if they do, they are going to be riding high on the way to feeling like they are Super Bowl bound. But the Patriots are probably going to focus on Zeke, shut that down, put the game in Zach's hands. But still be able to trust their corners with at least Amari Cooper, who hasn't looked like himself of late. He's got that knee injury and everything. Who knows how that's going to end up ultimately playing out for him. Cowboys could use the win, though, to put some more space between them and the Eagles before the Eagles go on that stretch of games. The Cowboys' end of season schedule looks a little bit different, obviously, but after the Patriots, they host Buffalo, they go to Chicago, will come here to Chicago. They host the Rams at the Eagles, and then they host the Redskins. They have a pretty winnable schedule too down the stretch, so the Eagles might actually want to try it a little bit harder than I initially presumed to win this game, because the Cowboys are going to be a tough team to catch if they don't. Of course, they could always lose to New England. New England could repay the favor that they paid to the Cowboys last week. Who knows? The Packers at 8-2 will take on the Niners at 9-1. That's going to be a great game to watch. The 49ers defense against that Packer offense that's been coming alive of late. And it will be also interesting to see how the 49ers offense, which can be hit or miss sometimes. Jimmy Garoppolo loves to turn the ball over, just loves it. He's the West Coast Mr. Trubisky with a much higher salary. I've been saying I think that the 49ers are the 2019 version of the 2018 Bears for a while now. And then the Packers defense, see that offense, the Niners offense against the Packers defense, especially in the running game. We know the 49ers can run the ball. The Packers struggle to stop the run. But I would imagine that they're going to do everything they can to load that box and force Jimmy Garoppolo to beat them deep or over the top. It'll be interesting to see if he can. That game is at home for San Fran, so that is a boost to Jimmy Garoppolo's prospects. And then that's the Sunday night game. The Monday night game is the Baltimore Ravens at 8-2 taking on the 6-4 Rams. This game does not look as much interesting for competitiveness as much as it is for Lamar Jackson to strengthen his MVP candidacy. I think he is the MVP now with what he's doing, both in the air and on the ground, having people bring up that age-old conversation. Our team's going to start changing how they evaluate the quarterback position. No, they won't. They'll still deny him until the very end and say that he's not all that he's cracked up to be, and things are all phony and whatever, blah, 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 blah. But that Rams defense is tough. And if he can go out there and shut them down, now they're tougher on the ground than in the air, but as we know, the Ravens are a running team, so it'll be incumbent upon Lamar to go out there and show that he has grown enough as a passer to take this team far in the playoffs and not just make it through what a lot want to attribute to simply smoke and mirrors. We'll see how that goes, but this is going to be a tough game for him. It's going to be an even tougher game for the Rams. They are beat up and just don't look all that right now. The Rams, they did ride Todd Gurley against the Bears, but I think this one should be a little bit more competitive for them, challenging for them defensively with that Ravens offense. And then switching gears, now that we moved on from the NFL section, switching gears to the NBA. The first of all, got to acknowledge, because I didn't record the night that it happened, but Ben Simmons hit a 3-ball. And the Philadelphia 76ers are 1-0 when Ben Simmons hit the 3-ball. Remember that stat. Yeah, just had to get that out of the way because I didn't come on, but that was awesome. But I wanted to talk about Carmelo Anthony and what he's done since rejoining the Portland Trail Blazers a couple of games ago. I think it was easy for people to want to say that, Melo was the reason for a lot of failures in his last couple of stops with Houston and with OKC. But I think on a team like this, which, by the way, Portland is really struggling. They are really bad this year. I'm not sure what went wrong, but they seem to really have gone by the wayside from where they were last. This team that made the Western Conference Finals and made big shots while doing it, and they just can't seem to string together any wins. And that's got to be concerning for anybody that's a Portland Trailblazers fan, but more importantly, it's got to be a concern for the management. They just fell most recently to the Milwaukee Bucks 129-137, but it's got to be a concern because they paid that backcourt, CJ and Dame, and I'm a huge Dame fan, and I think CJ is one of the most underrated guards in the league, but I've also been on record as saying they are very similar in what they are able to do, and that is going to hinder them going forward. Now you bring in a Melo who is really just a bigger version of both of them, where he's a scorer first and then a facilitator and everything else later, and really a non-factor on the defensive side. But he just adds to the frustration of what this team really is. It's just a bunch of ISO guys in between 1 through 3, and then 4 and 5 are bigs who are just protecting the paint and doing those other things, doing the dirty work. Melo he's averaging 10 points his first game back. He had 18 his most recent one. they lost, and then you had people jumping on social media. Oh, they were a -20 with Melo on the floor, and somebody else the best reply to it was they were -20 without him on the floor, no matter who was on there. Portland is, like I said, it really just makes you go back to, it shows you how much Portland is struggling at 5-11. I would like to see them move Hassan Whiteside. If they get Yusef Nurkic back anytime soon, I'd like to see them move Hassan Whiteside for Kevin Love, if that's at all feasible for either side. Because Melo, Kevin Love, CJ, and Dame quartet with scoring the ball, and then Yusef Nurkic down low, that's a pretty dangerous team, and I think one that a lot of teams would not want to see come playoff time, because they have guys who get buckets flat out. The Sacramento Kings have kind of taken a major step back and just stagnated in their development a lot worse than I think what many had figured for them, especially after that kind of surge that they had late in the year last year. They sit right now at 6-8. They're not anywhere by any stretch out of it, but they just don't seem to be. They just don't seem to be progressing. They didn't seem to take that next step from where we thought they would after last year. Now, obviously, you have Buddy and De'Aaron. They're both, neither one of them scoring 20. That's what's I think interesting. Buddy got that big contract. You would hope that he would at least be scoring 20 points a game, and maybe even better than at 41% at a 41% clip. That might be the more concerning part. He's a volume scorer though, so maybe that number's not going to bother too many folks. Fox, 18 points, 43% completion. Field goal percentage, still in football mode. You expected a lot more from them. I'm not going to even try to sugarcoat it. You expected a lot more from these two, especially, but from this team. Maybe that's because they built it with a bunch of veterans that really didn't fit, and maybe with eyes towards shipping them out later. But right now, it just looks like an awkward, clunky group, and one that you would expect to see do better than they are right now. The Houston Rockets, I want to jump to them real quick. The Houston Rockets sitting right now at the third in the West, 11-5. Beard and Brody, two players that everybody said were not going to do well. Russ is going to struggle outside of OKC because of how the bigs down there let him get rebounds. He's going to pout. He's going to keep the ball from James Harden. James Harden is about to average damn near 40 points for the season. So let's just get that out the way. Russ's numbers have taken a step back, but I don't think that's been to the detriment of the team because, like I said, they're sitting at third in the West right now. I don't know how you can really argue with that results. They are at Harden, 38 points on 42. Russ, 21-8 on 41-6. 7.9 boards, 6.9 assists for Russ as well. Look, man, this team is what you want, what everybody wanted the Chris Paul, James Harden Rockets to be, but on steroids. Russ is a nice change up to the kind of finesse game that the rest of the Rockets play. He comes in there with that fastball, and that just knocks everybody off kilter. I'm excited to see what they can do. They can sneak up on a lot of teams because people are going to want to still have that stigma attached to both of them that they're selfish. Harden's going to fade and Russ is going to be selfish, but I really think that kind of complements each other well in some kind of sick, twisted, codependent way, because where Harden is going to be gassed, Russ is going to naturally take over the game anyway, because that's just what he does. Now, the results of that, hey, look, I'm not claiming any type of insight how that's going to turn out, but I think that actually could work to both of their benefit, that Harden naturally at times goes into a show because he just gets gassed from doing all these scoring. Now, I am concerned also, I do, just to be a little, play devil's advocate, does Harden's pursuit of an MVP award and, going on the scoring tear, because it's clearly a priority for him, is that what ultimately caps his team from winning in some way, shape, or form? I'm not sure, but I could definitely see it being that being the case, because I don't know if I'm not sure if that's just something that he needs to be his focus. Again, he obviously works on his craft. That's not to say he doesn't at all. That's just one of those things you kind of look at like, oh wow, because he mentions it a lot. Like a lot. He talks about not getting the MVP award a lot and how he averaged X amount of points and still didn't get it. So how the media creates narratives, that was a whole thing during the summer. So, a lot. They need to decide. I feel like that doesn't mean he's not focused. I'm just saying what he's saying publicly gives off the impression that award is more important to him than actually going and winning a championship. And then we're going to wrap up everything here in LA with the Clippers and the Lakers, both of whom are doing much better now in the regular season than I thought they would be doing, especially the Clippers with how much load management they've been going through. And then let me not talk about the Lakers. The Lakers have had some injuries decimate their team. They lost Boogie before the season even started. Kuzma had the injury, and then AD's dealing with the shoulders. Avery Bradley's out now. They just got Rondo back. But both of these teams are doing good, better than I thought they would. I am concerned. I'm not concerned, but a concern for the Lakers could be LeBron's minutes right now. He's playing a lot of minutes to begin the year. He's averaging 34. Him and Davis are both averaging 34. Both averaging 25 points too. So they're averaging 50 together. Oh my God, that's crazy. But that's a lot of minutes for LeBron in year 17, especially after we saw him break down. Maybe that's too harsh of a word, but we saw him get in a significant injury for one of the first few times in his career, and a groin, lower body injury on a player who is built off a lot of power, a lot of push. He talked about how he had his quick twitch athleticism back coming into the season. 34 minutes a game, and he's played in 14 games, and the Lakers have played 15 games. That's gonna have to slow down at some point for him to maintain this level of play throughout the rest of the year. Now, granted, this could be their whole goal, jump out to that quick early lead, and then he can rest some in the middle and then get warmed up again, and they can go back to get, they end up somewhere around the 3 or 4 range possibly. But as of right now, there's no way he can keep up this pace. And then for the Clippers, I'm pleasantly surprised. I thought there would be challengers to the Lakers. I picked the Lakers to come out the West. I still have the Lakers come out of the West facing the Sixers in the NBA Finals, and I'll have to see. I need to watch some more. I'll probably have a winner by the All-Star break, likely before that. I'm just saying. But the Clippers have had to go in. They started the year without Paul George. Kawhi Leonard's only played in a handful of games himself because that just is. I'm pulling up his number of games played right now. He's played in 10 of their 16 games. He's already sat out 6 games. So they're taking the proactive approach, whereas the Lakers are looking like they're taking a reactive, where they're going to wait it out, build up that lead, and then rest LeBron and company later. LeBron, AD probably. But what's interesting here is that the Clippers are resting guys already. Their best player already just got back their second best player and are still only a couple of games behind the Lakers in the standings. That's something to keep an eye on going forward, because no team, I've been on record saying this, I had the Nuggets and the Jazz and company, and even I think the Blazers, I tried to put them in there too, but I had those, the Nuggets and the Jazz for sure, at the top of the Western Conference, and said that all of that won't matter once they hit the playoffs, though, because the Clippers and the Lakers are going to be the two teams that make it. The Rockets have to be in there too because of who they have, but as we know, star power is what wins in the NBA, and the two teams in LA have the most star power in the NBA, in the Western Conference, and the only people who can contest with them right now would be the Houston Rockets. The Chicago Bulls. Now, I said I was going to wrap it up with LA, but I have to hit on this. The Bulls tonight lost to the they lost. What am I doing? I'm losing my train of thought here. The Bulls lost to why can't I find? I'm sorry. I'm trying to pull up my notes. Bulls lost to the Heat, 116-108. They got smacked. Jumped out early into an early lead. Jimmy Butler hadn't even scored in the clip. The Heat went out to a 13-0 run to start the game or whatever. That's irrelevant. That's why I was getting sidetracked, because I want to talk about something else, but I had to address that first. After the game, they were talking to Jim Boylan about a sequence early in the first quarter. About 3 minutes in, he pulled Zach LaVine for what he said were 3 egregious mistakes on defense. When questioned about it, Zach bristled a bit and seemed to have a little bit of an issue with being singled out for what was clearly an overall poor start by the entire team, including Zach, but offensively as well as defensively. The Heat were putting the clamps on him, and they were just looking like world beaters. I knew Jimmy Butler wasn't going to let his team lose by 1 point again like he did the last 2 times. But to see this riff starting up now, it's almost a full circle thing. Now, all year I've been monitoring where the Bulls are compared to last year. I'm not the only one, I'm sure of it. They're one victory ahead of their pace from last year. But what kind of cemented Boylan's position to being able to maintain his spot as the head coach coming into this year was how the team kind of turned back in his favor after that near mutiny. And one of the early vocal voices was Zach LaVine, and he offered to pay his coach's fine when he got ejected. And it seemed like they had genuinely formed a bond, and Boylen had won these guys over. And if we are at the point now where Zach and he are clashing, and there's a rift there, and Zach feels singled out, or the connection's gone, Boylen could be in trouble. Because I've already been asking the question, how long does he last if he is on the same pace as Hoiberg? He'll probably get a lot longer leash because they don't want to look that foolish for firing a coach that quickly after giving him an extension, which doesn't make any sense, never did. But that's something they're going to have to watch. And in the player stock watch, which will be coming out sometime this weekend, I'm going to be looking at Lowry Marketing, who's got to be a faller this week. He's just not performing. He had another single-digit performance on both the boards and scoring the ball. And I've always said, look, scoring is going to come and go. We know shots just don't fall sometimes, and it can take guys some games, quite a few games, to get into that rhythm and find their legs, especially with the new offense that the Bulls are in, where they have Lowry doing a lot more spot-up work and a lot less ball handling, although they've kind of incorporated it more of late. But he's not hitting his shots, and then he's just not getting the boards. And then at 7 foot, they kind of need him to have some kind of a defensive presence, and he's just not. He's just nothing down low. And I before the year, I kind of wondered how and if Lowry really fit with what this team wanted to do. And I think the early answer has to be no, because it just hasn't looked right. He's had 2 good games this year, and everything else has just kind of looked, like, ugh, like, who is this dude? This is nowhere near the guy that everybody dubbed the finisher and thought that was going to be the best player on this team. I do understand Boylen challenging Zach. He is the best player, and I think he was more trying to send a message to the rest of the team than to Zach specifically, and I'm sure that's something that they'll work out. But to do so while letting Lowry have this free run of being awful, I think is where you kind of see some of the pushback from Zach. This team is far off what I thought they were going to be. I predicted them to make the playoffs in the preseason. That ain't happening. Not the way they're currently constructed. And then their master plan of trying to pursue Giannis Antetokounmpo in the offseason, which is not just their plan, it's everybody's plan. Not going to happen because they're not doing anything to entice anybody, from the players on the floor to the coaching staff to the guys evaluating, because we know why they are where they are right now. So it's just rough. It's a rough time right now for this team as they find themselves sitting at 5-11. Things just don't seem to be looking up, and I'm not sure when they're going to take a turn for the best, because what's ailing them is them. They can't seem to get out of their own way. They haven't put together a complete game. The 3 misses that Boylen mentioned for Zach, if they are the ones that the Athletic Stephen Node found and put on Twitter, then they were bad. But they've been bad. Zach's a bad defender. And despite him wanting to be a better defender, it's just not there. He loses concentration. He ball watches. He gets lazy on his rotations. He's more focused on trying to score. And what's really compounding it is that his offense hasn't been bad. I actually released an article for Pivot Ain't Easy a couple of days ago where I spoke about how Zach's biggest problem is finishing around the rim. He was finishing around 50% last year. This year he's around 40%. And he's not passing the ball out of those situations either. And you've seen it late in game, especially his hero ball antics are getting the Bulls killed. Tonight it was everybody. It wasn't just him tonight. So that's the thing. I think that might be where some of the frustration is coming from him, where he's like, look, I've been our best scorer all year. By far the team's best scorer all season. He's had some hiccups. And again, that hero ball stuff has cost them some games. I'm sure of it. But at the same time, to single him out now, when the whole team came out flat, just seems like a misguided effort to get the attention of his team, and one that I think will ultimately fall on deaf ears. So we'll see how well he bounces back, but he's going to have to do something to bounce back, because if he doesn't, he's going to be in a lot of trouble, because I just don't know how much longer the fan base is going to be able to put up with seeing the effort and seeing what we see from this team on a nightly basis. That's just going to be something that just won't be able to stand with this team, because it's been too long, and they've been, the preseason is preseason, but they showed us a lot of things that we haven't seen so far this year. And I'm just not sure where they go from here. I don't think it gets any better because I'm not sure that Boylen can make anything other than statements of play harder, try harder, fight, care, energy. He's a rah-rah type of coach. He's not an X's and O's type of coach, in my opinion. Now, granted, I'm not in the huddle. I'm not sure what he's drawing up when they're at the Berto Center or things of that nature, but every press conference is another soundbite, another quotable, and not anything of substance. So that could be the other part that's falling on deaf ears. Maybe, guys are like, look, you're not helping us, putting us in good positions to succeed either. So, his rotations have been bad. His clock management has been bad. So this could just be the full circle of the chaos that his tenure began with, and could be also on the verge of ending very, very prematurely under similar sorts of chaos. So that's just something to keep an eye on with the team struggling to put together any sort of consistent competency for an entire game. So that's going to do it for this episode of Triple Zeros. Get at me on Twitter at Josh G. Buck, on Facebook at Jukes and Jumps. The website is jukesandjumpers.wordpress.com, and the email address is jukesjumps@gmail.com. Until the next time, in the meantime, in between time, always you can check out the podcast on Stitcher, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, and on Anchor. And of course, you can always hit up the Facebook page or send me a message if you want to be on the show or have any questions or comments. Until the very next time, though, I'm out.